Hi, my name is Jordan Korfman, and this is my presentation on criminal justice systems around the world. Criminal justice is something that is critical and used in many different aspects of law and government, and also aids in how laws are enforced, developed, and implemented within a country. Criminal justice systems are different all around the world and vary in their approaches. These systems are typically shaped from the country's history and culture and also possess different forms of law and punishment. Law enforcement, judicial, and correctional processes all vary depending on the country, some having similar ones and some having very different ones. This presentation will explore the justice systems within Great Britain, France, Germany, China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia, and compare and contrast them with the justice systems in the United States. To begin with the criminal justice system within the United States, this system is built into three parts that are put together to help ensure public safety, enforce laws, and also manage those who do not abide by these laws to bring justice. These three sections contain law enforcement, courts, and corrections. These systems are used to regulate private and government agencies at a local, state, and federal level. Law enforcement enforces the law within the country and makes arrests and issues citations to those who do not follow it. Courts are used in order to hold trials, which is their way to ensure justice is being provided in a fair manner. These trials have opening statements, the presenting of evidence, closing arguments, and end with the sentencing of the offender by a judge, and the jury is also involved. Corrections is what occurs after an individual is arrested, tried, and sentenced. Corrections are used to help rehabilitate an individual to hopefully enter them back into society after their sentence, and provides treatment, supervision, and also punishment in many cases. The criminal justice system in Great Britain is made up of institutions that work together to relay justice. This system possesses the police, the courts, prisons, and prosecution with the goal of processing offenders as efficiently as they possibly can. Police have the role of upholding the law, protecting public safety and order. They partake in community policing, traffic enforcement, and also make arrests. The court in Great Britain begins with the magistrates' court, and when they have more serious matters, those are sent to the Crown Court. If an appeal is made in the Crown Court, it then goes to the Court of Appeal Criminal Division and sometimes the Supreme Court. Prisons in the UK are managed by Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, along with the Ministry of Justice. These prisons vary greatly depending on gender, age, and also the type of prisoner that they possess with the type of crimes that they committed. The Crown Prosecution Service is the primary prosecuting agency in the UK, and this agency is in charge of choosing which cases to prosecute. They advise the police, and they prepare for court, and also help support victims. France uses an inquisitorial system, which is written and does not always give the individuals involved the right to be heard. France separates criminals into three groups of offenses. These courts in France enforce criminal law and possess the police tribunal, which deals with minor offenses, the correctional court, which deals with misdemeanors, and then the cour d'assises, which is serious crimes. Trials in France are ruled by a judge, but they do little investigation or cross-examination, and the offender usually does not have the right to silence in these trials. Victims in France are compensated by the state if the offender cannot give that to them. And judicial investigations are very rare in France, and they determine if there is enough evidence against a suspect to be tried in court or not. Germany also has an inquisitorial system, which again just means that there is little back and forth between the prosecution and the defendant, and everything is primarily led by the judge in this courtroom. Prosecutors are responsible for investigating criminal offenses as opposed to the police. Pre-trial investigations take place to ensure they have enough evidence that has been collected in order to try somebody in court. They use tribunals for lower-level court cases, and then regional courts are used for sentences of more than 4 years and deal with appeals. High regional courts deal with issues such as terrorism and war crimes. Germany does not use juries and has state-elected officers in charge. The criminal justice system in China is very strict and not only affects those who live within the country, but also those who visit. Police can arrest and detain individuals in China up to 37 days before the prosecutor approves the arrest. Some individuals are even detained for up to 13 and a half months before a trial. Offenders in China do not have the right to remain silent, and their court system has 4 levels, which consists of the Supreme Court, and then 3 levels of local courts, which are high, intermediate, and basic. The Communist Party group reigns head in the judiciary in China and in trials. Japan's criminal justice system is based off of civil law, which is concerned with private relations as opposed to military or religious affairs. The court system in Japan is a 3-tiered system, which consists of a district court, a high court, and a Supreme Court. In Japan, individuals are innocent until proven guilty and do have the right to counsel. Prosecutors must prove that they are guilty in a court. They also follow the inquisitorial system, meaning that the judge rules over it and decides the fate of the defendant as opposed to a jury. The state provides financial assistance to victims of violent crimes. The criminal justice system in Saudi Arabia is very, very strict. It is based off of Sharia law, which combines the idea of law with morals and ethics. Sharia is Islamic law that wants people to live according to the Muslim God's goodwill. The courts are separated into 3 different ones, being the ordinary courts, high courts of Sharia law, and the court of causation or appeals. Trials in Saudi Arabia usually have the defendant defend themselves and do not have the right to counsel. Punishments for crime in Saudi Arabia are very severe. They include physical punishments like beatings, and people are very often put to death. Some of these nations have similarities with the U.S. justice system, but also have quite a lot of differences. For example, Britain has many differences in regard to the fact that they have systems that are set into place for the command of the Queen or royalty at the time, as opposed to the U.S., which has local, state, and federal laws. Britain has similar commands for police when it comes to upholding safety and security, but also has a similar idea for the court process as the U.S. France, Germany, and Japan all have an inquisitorial system, where the U.S. has an adversarial system, which means that in the U.S., judges act as mediation between the prosecution and defense, and are there to ensure fair trial, as opposed to the inquisitorial, where the judge is more active and determines which way the trial goes. France has very little investigation done compared to the U.S. and relies more on the evidence that the prosecution can or cannot find, as opposed to an actual police investigation like the U.S. Similar to France, Germany also relies on the prosecution to investigate crimes, which is different from the U.S., where the prosecution may gather evidence but doesn't do a lot of police work within a crime. Germany also has different levels of courts like the U.S., but does not have a jury, where the U.S. relies pretty heavily on a jury within court systems. China differs very greatly, where individuals do not have the right to a speedy and fair trial like they do in the U.S., or have the right to remain silent. Communism in China also leads to many more very strict differences, where the U.S. has a democracy set into place. The U.S. follows a common law approach, whereas Japan follows civil law, which means that in Japan, law is governed by statutes, when the U.S. It's based off of judicial decisions. Similarly to the U.S., Japan's offenders are innocent until proven guilty. And then the systems in Saudi Arabia differ very greatly from the U.S., first considering their law is based more on religious standpoints, as opposed to the U.S. maintaining safety and security. And defendants have the right to defend themselves and not the right to an attorney, which is very different from the U.S., where they often provide one for the defendant. Punishments are also very drastically different, where the U.S. sends them to prison for their time and gives treatment, whereas Saudi Arabia uses physical punishments and often death. For my biblical application, the Bible says that we are to judge impartially and to be humane to those who have done wrong. And for example, Deuteronomy 1:17 states, Do not show partiality in judging. Hear both small and great alike. Do not be afraid of anyone, for judgment belongs to God. Bring me any case too hard for you, and I will hear it. And Lamentations 3:34-36 says, to crush underfoot all prisoners in the land, to not deny people their rights before the Most High, to deprive them of justice, would not the Lord see such things? To conclude, criminal justice systems all around the world hold many similarities, but also have many differences, often depending on the different cultures and histories. Being knowledgeable of your own country's legal systems, and as well as legal systems all around the world, can be crucial and important when traveling, learning, or working in the field of criminal justice. These are my references. Thank you so much for listening.